When I locked eyes with him, everything froze for a split second. My rifle jammed right when I needed it most. There was no time to think. We always carried a knife in our boots for moments like that, so I pulled it out and did what I had to do to survive. You're about to step into something much bigger than yourself, a mission to confront growing aggression head-on. And believe this, good will win in the end. It has to. I came from a family that knew service well. I had 3 brothers in uniform, 2 served in World War I, and then there was me. Later on, that tradition carried forward. I had 3 grandsons who all served in the 82nd Airborne, the exact same division, and even the same company I was in. Then one of my great-grandsons followed the same path, same unit again. The 82nd, the 505th, it stayed in the blood. I didn't join the paratroopers for glory. I grew up during the Great Depression, so money mattered. Paratroopers were paid better, and that was enough reason for me to go that route. Training wasn't easy. You had to complete 5 jumps. On the 5th one, you could back out if you wanted, but that meant you were done, washed out. If you made that jump, you were in for real. From there, training intensified. A lot of it happened at night because that's how we were going in. They even built sand table setups of the exact areas we'd land in, showing us every detail of the mission. We studied it over and over until it was burned into our minds. It built tension, like something big was coming, and when it finally did, there was almost a strange sense of relief. We were ready. Before deployment, they kept us isolated, barbed wire around the camp, no way in or out. The government even paid us 6 months' salary in advance. With nothing to do, a lot of guys spent their time gambling. It passed the time. When it came time to board the plane, most of us were in good shape, well rested. I was the last one to get on because I had a leg pack strapped to me, 20 pounds of explosives tied to my leg so it would go out with me when I jumped. As we flew over Cherbourg, things got intense. The Pathfinders had already gone in ahead of us, along with other units, so the Germans were fully alert. Anti-aircraft fire lit up the sky like fireworks on the 4th of July. I saw planes getting hit, one exploded mid-air, another practically came apart right next to us. Our plane took a direct hit too. A shell burst near the wing, and shrapnel tore through the aircraft. It killed one man beside me, then another on my other side. We kept taking heavy fire. The C-47 wasn't built for speed. It was slow, an easy target up there. Honestly, I couldn't wait to get out of that plane. Before we reached the drop zone, we had circled for a while. Our division was spread across multiple airfields back in England because there were too many planes for one place. As we regrouped in the air, I remember looking down. It was a clear, moonlit night, and the ocean below was covered with ships, thousands of them. It looked like you could walk across the water all the way to France. I don't know the exact number, but it was overwhelming. Above us were waves of bombers, and even higher were fighter planes protecting them. Seeing all that, I remember thinking, there's no way we lose this. Not with this kind of force. Then came the jump. I landed in Saint-Mère-Église, right in the middle of chaos. There had been a fire, buildings still burning, civilians trying to put it out while German troops were nearby. I was the first one out of the plane. When I hit the ground, I crashed through the glass roof of a greenhouse. Luckily, the leg pack hit first, so I wasn't badly injured. I found myself inside a large stone structure with a wall around it. I climbed over and moved through a churchyard. Gunfire echoed everywhere. A machine gun was set up nearby, and that's when I saw John Steele hanging from the church steeple. But I had a mission. My job was to get to the bridge. If we couldn't hold it, I was supposed to blow it. And if we reached it first, I had to check whether the Germans had rigged it with explosives. By the time I got there, though, the 508th had already beaten us to it. They had landed better and secured the bridge ahead of us. So there was nothing for me to destroy. From that point on, I just fought as infantry. General Gavin eventually gathered a group of us together. They didn't need that many men at the bridge anymore, so we were sent to Lafayette to act as backup, second-line defense in case the Germans broke through. That fight was brutal, no way around it. You have to understand, as paratroopers, we didn't carry heavy gear that could really deal with tanks. We had to work with whatever we had on us. Sure, we had bazookas, but even those weren't perfect. They could disable a tank by knocking off its tracks, but the crew inside could still fire back at you. So even when you stopped the machine, the danger wasn't over. The terrain made everything worse. The hedgerows in Normandy weren't just bushes. They were thick, towering walls of earth and vegetation, sometimes 10 to 20 feet high, with dense growth on top. Fighting there felt more like jungle combat than open field warfare. You couldn't see far, and most of the time, you were right on top of the enemy before you even knew it. It often came down to close-range, hand-to-hand encounters. I remember one push through a hedgerow. The Germans had been there long enough to know exactly how to defend it. They had everything set up perfectly: machine guns, firing angles, crossfire positions. As we moved from one hedgerow to another, they opened up on us from multiple directions. Bullets were flying everywhere. Men were dropping on both sides of me, and I knew they had us caught in a deadly crossfire. To this day, I don't know how I made it through without getting hit. I was lucky, no other way to explain it. On one occasion, we pushed through a hedgerow and managed to force the Germans back to the next one. I was carrying a Thompson submachine gun and a .45 pistol. As I climbed over the top, I caught a glimpse of a German soldier lying in a slit trench. His rifle was beside him, but he was looking in the opposite direction. The second he turned and saw me, my weapon jammed. No time to fix it. Instinct took over. I pulled the knife from my boot and ended it that way. That's how close the fighting was. Another time, we were moving through a hedgerow with thick vines and branches hanging everywhere. I had barely come through when a German soldier suddenly appeared just a few steps away. He had his weapon, but it got tangled in the vines. I tried to fire, but again, my gun failed me. There was no space, no time. I had to bring him down using the butt of my rifle. That was the kind of combat we were in, raw, violent, and personal. As we started pushing out of the hedgerow areas, things shifted again. Tanks began showing up in greater numbers. We had driven the Germans back, but they had a system. When they retreated, they didn't just run. They fell back into another defensive line, reinforced and ready. And when pressure kept building, they pulled back again, layer after layer, until you couldn't push any further. At one point, they brought in armor, and it changed everything. Tanks started moving across the battlefield, and we had nothing to match them. In Normandy, there were very few openings through the hedgerows, just narrow gaps used by farmers for wagons and livestock. The Germans had those spots dialed in perfectly. Anytime our tanks tried to move through, they were hit immediately by German 88s. I saw it happen again and again. Our tanks didn't stand a chance in those choke points. So there we were, mostly relying on bazookas and small arms, trying to hold the line. Eventually, the Germans pushed forward hard and overran our front. I was in the first line of slit trenches when it happened. Their tanks rolled right over them, crushing everything in their path. As they got closer, I started looking around for the bazooka operator. We needed that weapon now more than ever. I turned and saw him. He'd been hit and was lying still. The bazooka was right next to him. I didn't hesitate. I ran back, grabbed it, and turned to face the tank. I took aim, but at that moment the tank rotated its gun toward me. I was staring straight down the barrel of that thing. It looked massive. I remember thinking, there's no way he's going to fire something that big at me. But he did. The shell went off, and I think it landed just behind me. Maybe he was aiming past me, maybe not. I don't know. But the blast hit hard. Shrapnel tore into my back and legs, and that was it for me. I was done. I couldn't keep fighting. The Germans captured me and took me to a field hospital. The doctor there did what he could, but my injuries were too serious to handle on the spot. He told me I had to be sent to a larger hospital in Paris. They loaded us into trucks, me and a few others who were badly wounded. Most of us were drifting in and out of consciousness. The journey should have taken just a few hours, but it stretched into nearly 2 days. Our aircraft controlled the skies, and the Germans were constantly under threat. They avoided moving during the day because they'd get attacked. Even at night, if there was the slightest light, they risked being spotted and hit. Eventually, we reached Paris. There, a German surgeon operated on me. And I'll say this, he did his job well. Back surgery at that time was risky, especially under those conditions, but he managed to pull it off. Somehow, I made it through. I still carry pieces of that war with me, literally. There's shrapnel still lodged in my back. Doctors always told me to leave it alone unless it started causing problems, because trying to remove it could be more dangerous than just living with it. After everything, I was sent to a place called Stalag 12A. It was more like a processing camp where prisoners were sorted and then sent out to different locations. Some went to labor camps, others to different kinds of work. I ended up being assigned to a coal mine. That mine went deep, felt like a quarter-mile underground. It was dark, heavy, and suffocating. There was an older Czech miner working there, and an SS guard watching over everything. The guard barked orders at me to get to work. I refused. I told him I wasn't supposed to work for the enemy, that the Geneva Convention protected us from that. That was a mistake. Before I even realized what was happening, he swung his rifle into my back and knocked me down. Then came the kicks. He beat me badly right there. I had no choice after that. I got back up and did what I could, loading coal into the carts, just trying to survive the moment. The next day, that Czech miner pulled me aside. He warned me not to provoke them again. He said they wouldn't hesitate to kill me. I understood what he was saying, but part of me still held on to that resistance. I told the guard again I wouldn't work, and I paid for it again. Another beating. That's when it hit me. If I wanted any chance to live, I had to play along, at least on the surface. Still, the thought of escape never left. There was a man named Jim McMillan, a former paratrooper like me, but from London. We'd talk during the walk back to the barracks. It was about half a mile, maybe a bit more, from the mine. Guards surrounded us the whole time, 2 in front, 2 in the middle, 2 behind. There was no easy way out. One day, Jim said something that stuck with me. He said, "We're going to die in that mine." And the truth was, he wasn't wrong. We both knew it. Either we took a chance and tried to escape, or we stayed and slowly wasted away underground. Getting caught would probably mean death, but staying meant the same thing, just slower. So we made a decision. It was early spring, still cold, with snow and sleet on the ground. As we were marching back to the barracks, something unusual happened. There were no guards in the middle of the line that day, just front and rear. That gap gave us a moment, a small opening. We moved quietly toward a patch of undergrowth along the side. Jim looked at me and said, "Let's go." I didn't hesitate. I told him, "You've made the call, I'm with you." And just like that, we broke away. By the time the rest of the group reached the barracks, the guards realized 2 men were missing. They counted everyone as they left the mine, and again when they returned. It didn't take long for them to figure out what had happened. The alarm went out almost immediately, but by then, we were already moving. The problem was, we didn't know the area at all. We had never been outside the route between the mine and the barracks. Everything beyond that was unfamiliar. What we didn't realize was that the mine wasn't far from a small village. As we got closer to it, we were spotted. A local policeman saw us and shouted for us to stop. We knew what that meant. There was no turning back now. Right nearby, maybe 30 feet away, there was a large barn. Without saying a word, we both took off running toward it. We didn't stop to think, we just ran. He didn't fire right away, and for that moment, we had a chance. He must have figured he had us cornered the moment we ran into that barn, and honestly, he wasn't wrong. Once we got inside, it was empty. No tools, no hay, nowhere to really hide. Jim started moving around, looking for any place we could disappear into. I stayed near the door. When the guard came through, I grabbed a wooden beam they used to bar the door from the inside, just a solid piece of lumber, and I was ready. But everything happened in seconds. The moment he stepped in, he spotted Jim. Without hesitation, he fired and killed him right there. I didn't even have time to react before it happened. As soon as the shot rang out, I swung the beam with everything I had and struck him across the face. That blow killed him. I didn't waste a second after that. I grabbed his rifle, his ammunition, anything I could carry, and ran. I knew that gunshot would draw attention fast. Sure enough, it wasn't long before I could hear the dogs. They used them to track escapees, and they were good at it. I had to think fast. By luck, more than anything, I came across a stream. It was about 20 feet wide, not too deep, maybe up to my waist in some spots, but the water was freezing cold from the snow melt. Still, I knew if I got in, the dogs would lose my scent. So I stepped into that water and started moving through it. Every second felt like it was draining the life out of me. It was bitter cold, and I could feel my body starting to shut down. I stayed in as long as I could, maybe 3/4 of a mile, until I realized I couldn't take it much longer without risking hypothermia. When I finally climbed out, I listened. The dogs were gone. Either they lost the trail or gave up. Maybe they figured I couldn't have gone far and planned to pick it up again in daylight. I found a spot near a road, hidden in thick brush, and stayed low. After a while, I started hearing artillery in the distance, and something about it told me it was American. The next morning, I saw a small spotter plane overhead, one of those Piper Cubs. Below it, the road was packed. First came civilians, refugees trying to get out, then German infantry, followed by tanks and half-tracks. They were retreating. The Americans were pushing them back hard. I stayed hidden, maybe a football field away from the road, just watching. When I saw that plane circling, I had a feeling what was coming next. About 5 minutes later, artillery fire came down on that road. A full barrage. It tore everything apart. Vehicles, troops, everything. It was devastating. After that, I figured American forces wouldn't be far behind. So I waited. Another day passed. The Germans had moved through, and then I started seeing American infantry coming in. I wanted to go out right then, but I held back. I knew I looked rough, dirty, worn down, probably half-starved. I didn't want to risk getting mistaken for the enemy and shot on sight. So I waited until most of the troops had passed. Then I noticed a soldier sitting in a jeep by the roadside. He seemed to be busy, maybe working with a radio. I made my move. I came out from behind him quietly and tapped him on the shoulder. He jumped like he'd been struck by lightning, scared him half to death. He turned around, looked me over, and said, "What are you doing out here? You look terrible." I told him straight. I just escaped from a German prison camp. After I told him I'd just escaped, he kept staring at me like he wasn't sure whether to believe it or not. I must have looked like a ghost, soaked clothes, mud everywhere, face probably bruised and hollow from everything I'd been through. He asked me a few quick questions, trying to figure out if I was telling the truth. Once it clicked for him, his whole attitude changed. He got me into the jeep right away. I remember how strange it felt just sitting there, not being yelled at, not being watched by guards. He handed me something to drink and called it in over the radio. Within minutes, more soldiers showed up. They looked me over, checked that I wasn't armed in any threatening way, and then started asking about the camp, the mine, how many prisoners were still there, what kind of guards we had. Everything I could remember, I told them. They moved me back behind the lines pretty quickly. I was taken to a field station first. Medics cleaned me up as best they could, checked my injuries, wrapped what needed wrapping. That's when they found more damage than I realized. Bruises, cuts, and the deeper stuff from the beatings. My body had just been running on survival. I remember the feeling of being warm again. It sounds simple, but after being out in that cold water and hiding in the brush, just sitting under a blanket felt unreal. They gave me food too, and I had to force myself to eat slowly. After being half-starved, your body doesn't handle a full meal the way you expect. The strangest part wasn't the pain or even the exhaustion. It was the quiet. No guards shouting, no fear of being dragged out or beaten, no counting lines or marching orders, just quiet. But even then, my mind kept going back to Jim. We had made that decision together. He knew the risk just as much as I did. That moment in the barn stayed with me. There wasn't time to think then, only react. But afterward, it settles in. You carry it. The officers who debriefed me wanted every detail about the camp, layout, routines, guard positions, anything that could help others or support the advance. I told them about the mine, the depth of it, how prisoners were forced to work, how the guards rotated, how the marches were organized. They took notes on everything. Eventually, they moved me farther back to a proper facility. I got a chance to rest, really rest, for the first time in a long while. Clean clothes, a bed, medical care. It felt like stepping into another world. But even with all that, it didn't feel over. Not right away. You don't just switch off what you've been through. The sounds, the tension, the instinct to always be ready. It sticks with you. I was lucky. A lot of men didn't make it out of places like that. Some didn't survive the work. Some didn't survive the guards. And some didn't make it when they tried to escape. Every step I took after that felt like something I had to earn, like I had been given a second chance. Even years later, parts of it never really leave. The memories, the faces, the choices you had to make, they stay with you. But so does the feeling of that moment when I stepped out of the brush and finally saw my own side again. That's something I never forgot. It all came down to a single choice: risk everything for a chance at freedom, or slowly fade away in captivity. Through fear, loss, and impossible odds, survival meant trusting instinct and never giving up, even when death felt certain. The escape wasn't just about getting away, it was about holding on to dignity, courage, and the will to live. And even after freedom came, the memories remained, a lasting reminder of what it took to make it out alive.